Hello, beautiful moms and entrepreneurs. Hello, Unbreakable Mompreneurs. My name is Sharice Walker, your host, and today I'm here with Kristin Chadwick, and we are actually going to talk about several different things. As we were talking before we got started on the show, it's so nice to talk about things that people are interested in. And the whole purpose of my podcast is to find your voice and to find your passion so that you can accomplish anything you want. And being a mom is part of that, but it's more than that as well. And so, Kristin, without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, well, I love that that's part of your podcast anthem is finding your voice, because that is a big passion of mine. So hello, everybody who is listening. It is an honor to be here with Sharice, and a little bit about me. I am in the thick of teenage life here. We have 4 teenagers. So life is always interesting and lots of wrestling because we have lots of boys. But I run a full-time, amazing podcast business. I am a podcast coach and a podcast manager, and I have a team of editors and right-hand women who help me produce multiple amazing men and women's podcasts to get their voices out in the world and to create kingdom impact. That is my heart's cry, is for people to step into courage of saying yes to the story that you've been given. And somebody out there needs to hear your story because it'll give them hope.
I love that. And it's interesting because it takes a lot of time to do this. This is a passion project. I'm not making money on it right now. Someday I hope to be. I'll talk to you about that after.
Yes.
But I think that it's just, I was showing my daughter because she's right now at home in bed, recovering from surgery and totally bored out of her mind. So I sat down with her and I Zoomed and recorded my training with her. And I'm like, okay, you need like 9 programs open and you need to do this and you need to do this. And she's like, Mom, oh my gosh. And she's like, why are you doing this? And exactly that reason is that I really feel strongly about women and making sure that they know that they can accomplish anything they want, and they just need to find out what that is and then have the faith and the determination and perseverance, quite frankly, to be able to go forward. And so how did you get into this?
Yeah, so it was not really on my radar. I did grow up, my dad was in broadcasting, my mom was a family counselor, and I really wanted to go into counseling. So that's pretty much, long story short, is I was headed in that direction and just felt a check in my spirit right up to the point of classes starting in grad school. And I just was like, you know what? I have to listen to this gut check of like, nope, I don't think this is it. And about 2 days later, one of my best friend's husbands called me. And some of you might know Focus on the Family, Dr. Dobson. So this is his son, Ryan. And he reached out to me and said, hey, we're leaving radio because we want to start a podcast and be able to talk about more openly what families and marriages are going through. And we would love you to be our podcast producer. This was 2016. So it was still very much in toddler phase of podcasting. And so I laughed and was like, what is a podcast producer? And they were like, oh, Kristin, it's already in your blood. You got it. And pretty much they threw me in the deep end. Much love to Ryan and his wife, Laura. But they saw in me something that I did not see in myself. So for about 4 years, I was mostly behind the scenes, coordinating with authors and influencers and lots of amazing people. But slowly they would have me come behind the mic and share my own story. And for me, in that season of 4 years, I went from, who in the world would want to listen to me? I am the behind the scenes. I will write your content and you be the voice. But they just wouldn't stop there. They opened up space for me to express what I had been learning, what I had been walking through as a mom, as a wife. And so that's really where it started, was them providing a space for me to use my own story to bring hope as well, even in the midst of, I was like, no, people want to listen to the Dobsons. They don't want to listen to producer K, but they just continued to fan the flame. And eventually it led to me starting my own podcast in 2020. And that's where the journey began.
So are you still working with them, or did you kind of branch out on your own?
Yeah, so I branched out in 2020. Laura is still one of my best friends, and Ryan and we still talk shop on podcasting. But yeah, that was such a gift to be able to learn from one of the greatest for sure.
It's amazing. Congratulations. And I
Thank
love
you.
that. Like, you never know. I think I had a VA, a virtual assistant, and she had been my assistant for 2 years in my real estate stuff and doing that. So I had trained her on a whole bunch. And then she's like, Sharice, I really do want to get into podcasting. Why don't you start a podcast? And I'm like, okay. And so then she ended up going in a different direction. I kind of chose that. Going different directions, but I loved her and it was great. And so she contacted me actually like last month and she goes, Sharice, I think it's great you're still doing it. Can I come
Mm.
back? You know? And it's just interesting to see, like, this isn't something I ever would have thought of doing, but it's like my passion project. And I realized as people approach you, hey, I want to be on your show for this reason, I'm really starting because I'm well over 100 episodes now, and it's almost 150 now. And it's like, okay, what do I want to accomplish with this? What am I trying? What's my mission? Because it started out with moms, let's talk about how to start a business. And
Hmm.
now let's talk about also being a mom. And so, I don't know, I think it's a great thing. And so, how do you help people, or what is your advice to help people who are thinking, yeah, I want to start a podcast?
Yeah.
What's your advice to get started?
Yeah. Well, I love that story of you. Very similar, kind of that, like,
Mhm.
oh, I've never really thought about that. And
Mhm.
now it's blossomed into this amazing gift to people. Yeah. So if somebody was to come to me and say, I want to start a podcast, I don't know where to start. My first question is usually, okay, what's your why?
Yeah.
What's the purpose? And we really dig into that because there's a lot of people that are like, well, I don't know. I just think that it would be fun. And that's really hard to gather your people because you're not clear on who your people are. And so I really love to dig into that. And what's really cool is in 2020, I actually came around. I didn't do counseling, but the Lord opened up a door for me to do life coaching. And so it's really neat that He gave me that gift because as a podcast coach, one of my jobs is to pull out from you those really unique, beautiful keys that you have for the world that is unique to you. I mean, there's lots of mompreneur style podcasts, but you are unique to you. And so I know that's a big common phrase that people will hear is like, well, there's already a podcast out
Yeah.
there about that. And so usually that's part of the conversation is let's unpack your uniqueness
Mhm.
and what your voice brings to the table. So we talk about that, the heart of it, and really going into more of the technical side of it of I want you to feel less overwhelmed. It can feel like, oh my gosh, where do I even start? Do I record here? How do I even get my podcast onto Apple Podcasts or Spotify? So we touch on that and what equipment do you need? What kind of mic? All of those things.
Mhm. And I think that's good because a lot of times, like, I have this mic here and I
Yeah.
used it for a long time, and I was so behind on episodes. And like, when the guests would talk, it'd be fine, but when I'd talk, it'd go super low. I'm like, what the
Oh,
heck? I can't
yeah.
even hear myself. And so disconnected the mic. It's here for looks, but I'm in the process of trying to figure that out because it's like,
Yeah.
hey, this isn't working. And so it's all these little things that you are an expert, and hiring somebody that can help you
Hmm.
get through stuff is an important thing, especially if they want to take it further. I'm a realtor, and lately I've had a whole bunch of clients of mine and friends of mine reach out. Hey, Sharice, I want to get my real estate license. And the first question, like you said, is, okay, why? Because
Hmm.
people think it's this glorified thing. Like, if I showed you how many hours behind the scenes, my husband's constantly, Sharice, your face is always in the computer. And
Mm.
I had to learn to put boundaries, but it's the same thing with anything that you're wanting to do, whether it be a
Right.
podcast, whether it be like starting a business. What is your why? And that is 101. If you can't figure that out, and then the next one is your niche. Who do you want to impact? If you can't figure those two things out, you are going to flounder. And it's
Hmm.
just, you might as well just call it your passion project,
Yes.
not make money.
Uh-huh.
Switching gears for a second, AI, that's something that has become huge.
Hmm.
So, how can that help somebody in the podcast world?
Oh man, there's so many tools that we can use now. But I always say it's tools. It's not your everything. So we are still in charge. We
Yeah.
still have the authority. So whether you use AI to help you come up with content, or you help it to edit your show, or you help, or you have AI create your show notes, through all of that, you still need to come to the table.
Mhm.
I love, love, love utilizing AI in a way that is just that. So, for instance, I have a podcast membership where the beginning of the year, or in December, we had a really cool call where we all came to the table with, okay, what is our word for 2025? What are the goals that we want? And what we did was, once we were solid there, like we took the time to be quiet, to pray, to listen, and really do the work
Mhm.
ourselves. We took that and then we plugged it into ChatGPT and asked it to create us a podcast and business plan according to the goals that
Wow.
we had. And what is so cool is it's like having an executive assistant right there organizing all of your things. And that in itself is incredibly amazing. Like we couldn't do that, 2 years ago. So I think in the correct order, it is such a gift for sure. Now, on the flip side of that, I know podcasters who they have millions of downloads, and they are missing even more downloads because they're using an AI tool to edit, and it's cutting off the end of their words in their episode. Now, these people have amazing content, and yet because of this little hiccup, it's preventing people from sharing the show because it's hard to listen to, even with quality content.
Interesting. That's
Yeah.
crazy. And I
Hmm.
think because I do use ChatGPT, like I take the show notes, I take all these different things, I throw it all into Jet, and like, the Mod Podge I'm making,
Yes.
and then I say, boom, write me a 250, 500 word description, and then I'll read through it, and I'm like, eh.
Yeah.
So I think that, I mean, some of it's good. A lot of times they'll butcher my guest names, even though I say, like, this is how you spell stuff. And so I think that it is important that, like you said, we still are in control.
Mhm.
Just because it's there doesn't mean that you have to take everything. Yeah, it's
Right.
great to give you an idea and get started, but
Hmm.
yeah, it's not all
Right.
comfort.
Yes.
Wow, that's great. So let's talk about, and I talk about this a lot, but the imposter syndrome. Like I had it with my daughter the other day that she really is struggling. Like she loves this industry that she's been in for so many years, but yet she still is having this imposter syndrome. And I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, then maybe we need to talk about switching industries because
Mhm.
if you're not willing to go and do all these things, then obviously it's not your passion. She's like, but it is. And
Oh,
so she can't get out of her own head. And what's your advice for getting rid of the imposter syndrome?
yeah. So the best way I, I I'm going to share a story, because this is really where my faith helped me in breaking through this. Now, do I still work through this? Absolutely. We are humans. So a couple years ago, this was right after COVID, like the year and a half of just everything was not normal. And
Mhm.
so I was invited to an in-person networking group with a bunch of women, and I walked in the room and talk about a physical response to imposter syndrome. I mean, I was like, I do not belong here. There are real estate agents who make millions of dollars and tons of amazing business women in my community. And like I sit behind a screen and I help other people, and like all the self-talk started to go. Well, the physical response was anxiety. and almost like a feeling of panic.
Mm.
And so I ended up saying yes to committing to this monthly group. I think purely out of just, I need to get out of the house. But every time I would show up and I would feel that overwhelming, like I'm going to throw up kind of feeling if somebody asked me a question. And which is odd because I use my voice as a living. And so I was praying about it. And one morning I was sitting on the floor in a picture of just seeing God the Father and Jesus right next to each other in the throne room. And it was unreal. I mean, it was real in my brain, but it just was so amazing. And I was just sitting there and I heard in my spirit, you belong in the throne room. You belong in any room. And it just clicked of like, oh, that is true. Like if I belong in the throne room, then I can walk into any room and already belong. That my identity is already set, that I'm accepted, I am already seen, I am already heard, I'm already known. And so I took that. And then the next time I walked into this networking group, I walked in with that as my anchor was, okay, Kristin, you belong in the room. You belong in the room. You belong in the room. And just over and over again, speaking that truth and really believing it was where it shifted even just my physical demeanor of like, okay, I can be at peace now and I can be who I am because it's already loved. Like I'm already purely accepted in him. So that was like my biggest shift. And what I encourage people is really it starts with how how can you anchor yourself in who you are, number one. um and I lean towards the faith base, so like how does God see you? And really the more we understand who God is, the more we know who we are. And so it's like this perpetual benefit of seeking him out, and then we get to understand ourselves even more. So it starts there, is who are we, and really knowing your whole being and your gift to the world, and not in a prideful way, but in a way of like, you are a gift. You were put here on this world for a reason. So even for your daughter, like just coming
Mhm.
back to like, what do you believe about yourself and what is true about you? And then moving from there outward. So it starts internal and then moving forward.
I love that for so many reasons. And so I just want to unpack it for a second because, first of all, you see two distinct images and beings, right? You have God the Father and his Son. They're not
Mhm.
one, right? And so you have these two people. And I want to talk about that for a minute because when Jesus was on the cross, like it was so painful that his father couldn't watch
Mhm.
anymore and actually had to walk away.
Yeah.
And so it shows that, first of all, Jesus decided to do this for all of us, right, for the
Mhm.
atonement. But he knew his divine purpose. He
Mhm.
knew why he came to this earth, and we all
Yeah.
have a purpose. He knew what he was supposed to do, and because of that, he had the strength he needed to be able to accomplish the mission he was put on this earth to do. And God knows him intimately, and he knew what he was going through and knew the pain that he was going through. And so I think about that. I was having a conversation with someone recently where they talked about knowing knowing that you're a child of God, that you're either a daughter or a son. And I think that this world is becoming very hard for our children. I think
Mhm.
it's the pressures of it. Like I raised my kids in a very faithful home and lectured them beyond belief about all
Mm.
not to do. And some of them have chosen to go and do those things. And I'm like, don't do that. And they're like, okay, mom, I know I screwed up. And it's like, no, it's not that you screwed up. But I think that they lost sight for a minute of their divine mission and their divine goal. And I think that people who can continue to go know that they are a daughter or a son of God. And that's what gets them through. And I think that for you, like believing that and having that strength is a good thing. And I think it's a reminder for me as a parent that when my children are struggling, which two of them really have been this last year,
Mhm.
they've lost sight of
Mhm.
the religion part of it, and they've
Mm,
let the world and the pressure of the world and the pressure of other people like influence them. And I think that when we're in our darkest of darks, and I think like I posted on Facebook recently, I'm so sorry because I feel like since the beginning of the year, like in a week and a half, well over 10 people that I know have lost a parent or,
mm,
I mean, people that are younger than me right now. It's just, it seems like
yeah.
so many people are leaving this earth. And
Mm,
I can't imagine the pain that they're going through because, like, I keep calling my parents, like, okay, you're okay right now, right? You're okay
yeah.
because you never know. And it's just, I
Hmm.
mean, I'm getting to that age where my parents are getting older and people around us. And so death is becoming very, very common. And it just seems
Hmm.
like, especially right now. But if we can remember the why we're here and what we're supposed to accomplish and just like get rid of all the other stuff because it really is just not necessary things. And Krista Mayshore, she's a coach of mine. She has this, it's called Stop, Snap, and Switch. And I
Mm,
actually changed it to the has method. But it really did change my life because when you start to have this imposter syndrome, like I'm not good enough, I can't do this. You
hmm.
stop and you snap this little band. I was looking for the bracelet, that's why.
Yeah.
And then you move it to the other hand. And so, like, I don't need that big of a reminder. So now I call it the has method, where you halt, identify that, like, why am I feeling like this?
Yeah.
Acknowledge it. And that's like, who's it coming from? It's not coming from Christ. It's not coming from
Hmm.
God. It's coming from Satan. He doesn't want you to be successful because there's a reason why you're doing what you're doing. And then you switch it to like a different type of thing. Like I'm here because. And so for you,
Yeah.
when you went to that meeting, I'm here because I was invited because
Hmm.
people saw the potential. You got into the
Hmm.
industry that you're currently in right now because people saw the potential in you.
Hmm.
I think that sometimes getting out of the house, getting out of
Yeah.
our head
Hmm.
really does make a difference because that way you can go and surround yourself with people. Like that's the
Hmm.
best thing. When I'm down, I call my clients and I go drop stuff off to them.
Yeah.
It reminds me like, oh, somebody does love me, you know? And I
Right.
think that that's the part is life is hard right now.
Yeah.
And that's getting back to the podcast. That's why so many people are doing it is there's messages that people need to hear. And
Hmm.
just because there is somebody else that's doing it, like every day it's like, oh, I wish why am I not getting more views or something?
Hmm.
But I keep in the back of my head, keep going, keep going. Like there's a
Yeah.
reason, there's a purpose. And so that's like if you as a listener are thinking about things right now and like, okay, it's the new year. What am I supposed to be doing? I'm so lost. I feel like you prayed and
Mm.
it came to you.
Hmm.
And I think that that's where, what do you say to somebody who is listening and they like, yeah, but I have been praying. I'm still
Yeah.
not getting an answer. What do you say?
Hmm. Oh, I hear that, and it is so hard to not hear an answer. And I mean, there would be a lot of questions that I would want to ask, but I think most of the time when we don't hear an answer, the Lord's doing something in our own heart in the meantime. And I love there is a pastor who says, if it's not good yet, the end is not here. And so, because according to the word, it says he works all things for those who love him, all things to good for those who love him. I'm totally watching how
Mhm.
that is lined up, but that's basically what it says. And even if it's not on this side of or of heaven, and it means in eternity, that is his heart. He is kind and he is good, and he never leaves us. So even in the not hearing or not receiving a tangible answer, he's still there, just as if like you and your spouse were sitting next to each other on the couch. You know that they're there right next to you. And so that's what I would say. Yeah, the waiting is so hard. And I have my own stories of waiting and asking for things that feel like forever, that they have been put at the foot of the cross. So I don't say that flippantly, but there's always something that the Lord is mending and tending to in our heart.
And I think that he might be answering in a different way. that you might not want to hear.
Absolutely. Yep.
And you're
Mm-hmm.
not prepared for that. You're not ready. There was a time where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid of this. And then I thought, okay, I just need to start the little baby steps because
Yes.
I'm working towards it rather than away from it. Okay, time is short, I know. And so I want two questions that I have for you. The first one is that like you have teenagers now, and so you're sitting on a park bench, and this new mom comes and sits next to you. She's 9 months pregnant, and you start talking, and she starts to like, oh my gosh, the world is like, my whole world is going to change. What is
Yeah.
one piece of advice that you give her? And not necessarily as a new mom, but just in the time that you've had your kids, some of them are getting ready to fly the coop.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What is one piece of advice that you would give her?
Don't forget to do, oh, well, there'd be two things. One is don't forget to heal your own heart.
Mm.
I truly believe that when we are open to allowing the Lord to do some heart surgery, like I just said, on our own stuff, it is where we can bring freedom to our children, and we don't respond out of our own story or our own narrative that may not be healthy or beneficial. So that is really leaning in on your own stuff in a healthy way, in a healthy way. And then number two would be to trust your gut. My own experience in motherhood has been, and I know with your story too, of just walking your twins through the NICU and all of that stuff. We've had our fair share of health journey here, and I can say that I don't think any parenting book, any outsider could nail exactly what I was sensing in my spirit than like just prayer, lots of listening, lots of fighting for our kids, and even when the experts or the authority were saying, nah, I don't think so. So that in itself of trusting your mom intuition is, your kids, on a very like deep level, your kids. And I think God created us that way. And it's such a gift. So those two things would be my heart for them.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Even from the time where I was in preterm labor with my kids and keep calling the nurse, she's like, you're fine, just put your
Mm.
bum up in the air. And I'm like, I cannot, no, this is much worse pain than putting like, no. And so finally, like I go in and oh my gosh, you're in labor. And it's 20 weeks, right? Or
Oh
21. And
man.
so um, we were able to save him. Obviously, everything was
Yeah.
fine, but it was 4 months of bed rest and a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I love that advice. And it is so true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can ask other people what to do, but yeah, you have to listen to your intuition. Okay, and the very last question is if like starting out within a business, what is something you wish you would have known that you know now?
Oh, that's a great question. Mm. I think again, it's the trusting my gut and in hiring people from the get-go to help, which feels like two sides of the same coin, is trust the leanings and the stirrings for help, and and being brave enough to say yes to help instead of trying to do all of the things, and yeah, to delegate in that way. So I think that would be my number one, is just having the yes to say, yep, I need somebody else to help me with organizing and creating this company.
And it is so true. Two heads and one. Multiple.
Yes.
And we've even talked a lot on this podcast about maybe you don't hire a full-time person, but you hire an expert. So if the expert is good at the podcasting, right? And then I have
Mhm.
somebody else that can do more of the design. I have, so it's what is somebody good at? And it doesn't mean that you have to hire a 40-hour week person, especially if you're starting out and you can't afford that. Just hire
Mhm.
the experts in the areas that you need help with and
Yeah.
out. So get started somehow because
Yes.
you do it on your own. So true. Well, if somebody wanted to, one of our listeners wanted to get a hold of you, like they're screaming, I need help. I need help. How do they find you?
Yeah. So, well, first you can find me on my podcast coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs. That is all about podcasting. If you want to hear more about my faith journey, I have another podcast called Wholistic Hearts, which is a WHOLISTIC. And you can find me on there, and you can find me on Instagram, Facebook at Kristin Fields Chadwick.
Thank you so much, Kristin, for being on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And moms, find your voice and find the confidence in yourself. And if you need someone to help you with that, reach out to Kristin or I, because I will be your biggest cheerleader to say, you can do it.
Yes.
I probably shouldn't have said it that way, but it really is a belief that you can accomplish what you want. You just have to get started. So go out and make it a great day. Beautiful moms, remember, you are unbreakable. Keep illuminating the world with your strength, pursuing your dreams, and reveling in the splendor of motherhood. This is Charisse Walker, bidding you farewell for now. Stay tuned for more empowering conversations on the next episode of the Unbreakable Mompreneurs podcast. Until then, keep shining bright. Signing off with love, Charisse Walker.